It's 9:04 already. Let's start, and the one who will join, they'll join in between, and we'll keep the format same. So if all of you, any one of you who's joining the Salaah webinar for the first time, so we'll keep the format same. How it goes is that first Geeteshwar will present his screen, and he'll talk about everything which is very important to keep your to keep yourself sane in whatever wherever you are in your career, everything needed for that. And then you can just unmute yourself. Once that presentation will be over, we'll pick the Q&A. So Q&A will be in two format. Either you can drop your question in the chat box and he will answer that, or else you can unmute and ask your question. So whatever you are more comfortable with, we'll go ahead with that. So Geeteshwar, people are anyway joining and I'll approve them. You can go ahead and present your screen and do that.
Sure. Sure.
And
Thank
to
you
all
so
of you, the sessions will be recorded, and you will all will receive a recording session in a day or two, and it will be posted on all the social media as well.
Thank you so much, Astha. So, hi everyone. My name is Dr. Geeteshwar Dewan. I am a psychiatrist. I've completed my MD very recently in the field of psychiatry. And we all felt that this is a very important topic, talking about handling stress, handling and as aspirants.
Geeteshwar, there's
And
some issue.
being an aspirant for a long period of time, I would say, just a second. Am I audible now?
Yes, but there was some network issue in between.
All right. I hope it's sorted now.
That's better now. Yes, perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. So being a medical aspirant my own self for a long period of time, going through the hustle of the exams, be it the undergraduate exams or the postgraduate exams, I have precisely gone through all the problems any aspirant might have faced. And then going through learning and becoming a psychiatrist my own self, I can now correlate all those experiences and formulate a plan wherein we can work on those collaboratively, work on those problems our own selves, and also identify the red flag areas where we actually need professional help. So for the same, I have prepared a small PowerPoint presentation where we talk about all the nitty-gritty. So I'll be sharing my screen with everyone. So my screen is visible? Artha, it's all visible?
Yes, yeah, it's all visible.
Perfect, perfect. So the topic of our session, as you all know, is Mind Maketh MD, which is building resilience for medical aspirants. Now, the first chapter of the discussion shall be understanding and accepting stress. So now, before turning on to the next slide, why do we need to understand and accept stress? So the first part is understanding. It means that, first of all, we need to identify if there is a problem. If we don't know the problem, how will we, change the cause of the problem? How will we modify the root cause of the problem? So we need to, first of all, understand the problem itself. And second is that we need to accept that it is happening to us. So for example, I know there's a problem, but I keep on ignoring it. Repeatedly, I would tell myself, ki nahi, koi baat nahi, ye to sabke saath hota hai. I minimize it again and again and again and again. And the problem persists. This means I'm not accepting it. I am continuously ignoring it. And therefore, the stress which I'm experiencing right now will soon turn into a cause of grave concern for me, and it will start affecting my mental health. So for that, we need to understand how stress works. So stress in itself is not the problem. The question would be, is stress our enemy? No, stress is not the enemy. What type of stress is the real cause of concern that we need to understand. So we all have seen this curve, or if we have not, then we might see this curve when we prepare for the postgraduate examination, when we read psychiatry. This is known as the Yerkes-Dodson stress response curve. So it says that when stress is introduced into our lives, initially our performance would improve. Initially we would be bored, but when the stress would come in, a light stimuli would come in, then there will be improvement in our performance. For example, if I have my exams coming up in 2 to 3 months, then that trigger of stress will be helpful to me because I will start picking up my books. I will start studying. So initially it will be helpful to me. Eventually it will help me to focus, to be energized, and that will cause an optimal performance. However, if I start to take too much stress, wherein it leads to anxiety, it helps me. It does not help me, but it rather encourages me to employ all the maladaptive coping mechanisms. That is, I'm doing all the wrong things. Then it will lead to exhaustion, it will lead to breakdown, burnout, fatigue. Therefore, it will become distress. So as soon as the eustress turns into
Hi, Geeteshwar. Again, there is some
either
network.
by my own stress or as a slightly better now.
A bit better, yeah. Can you just
Am I
repeat the last? Yeah, can you repeat the last one
Yeah,
which you were
I sure.
saying? Yeah,
Yeah,
we lost you there. Yeah.
I'll do that for sure. I'll do that. Sure. So high self expectations, long study hours, fear of failure, repeated attempts, social isolation, competitive environment, financial stress, family expectations, poor time management, sleep deprivation, clinical duties, and imposter syndrome. So I'm sure that all of us in different ways have gone through one of these situations while preparing for our exams in the long journey of our medical education. So all of these can be a source of stress. But as we discussed in the last slide, they are good till the time they are encouraging us to involve in activities which are related to use stress. That is, they are pushing us towards our goal. However, if they cause us disturbance, if they cause us anxiety, if they cause us disruption in our day-to-day routines, right, in our functioning, then it becomes a source of distress and it needs intervention. So as I discussed before starting this chapter, why is accepting and building awareness important? It is because if I know something is not right, I can evaluate the problem. If I evaluate the problem, I can start to notice the pattern. When I observe the pattern, I become aware. When I become aware, I can modify the maladaptive triggers. And when nothing happens, I seek professional help. So this helps us to understand, to become aware, and eventually to work upon what is causing us problem. And what does chronic stress do to us? We all are medical students. We all know that it impacts the various systems of the body. There are problems in the nervous system. There are problems in the endocrine system, in the cardiovascular system. I've just covered it in very brief. We don't need to go into the details of what it does, but this is just to tell you how it will impact us in the long run. Then there will be physical signs, there will be behavioral aspects, emotional symptoms. Eventually, initially, it will cause symptoms in the form of headaches, insomnia, poor work performance, irritability, lack of concentration, and eventually it will start affecting our day-to-day functioning. We'll not be able to study, to sleep, to talk properly, to eat properly, and eventually it will cause a significant disruption in our life. Now, the next part is how do we battle the performance pressure and how do we build mental endurance? This is what we are here for. This is the main part now. So we're going to talk about situations and we're going to talk about how we can employ various psychological tools whenever we are in that situation. So first of all, there are various tools which we'll talk about, but I will give an example for each tool so that we can know how to use that tool. For example, tool number one, the decouple self-worth from rank technique. Often we find ourselves uh, constantly blaming ourselves that because my rank is so and so in the examination, or because I'm performing in such a way in the grand tests, therefore I am this. So we really need to tell ourselves each time we do that, that my performance is a measurement of my skill and it is not my identity. As I study, as I improve my ability, eventually my skill will improve and eventually the rank will also improve. Then there's a tool which is to process over outcome reframing. So often we tell ourselves certain goals. For example, I must get a rank under 500. Now, here we are narrowing the capability of what the mind can do. We are only focusing on a number. And now this outcome, which we've labeled to our expectations, it will start to create an anxiety. So we have to rewire how we think, because at the end of the day, the performance pressure, this is built on how we are thinking or how we are fed certain information. So if we process it in the right way, the anxiety automatically softens down. So here we have to rewire it to the fact that I will complete X and X revisions, X number of weekly GTs, X number of recall sessions. We focus on the process. We don't focus on the outcome. For example, if I am getting a rank of 1000 and I want to get a rank under 500, then I have to think what I shall do to get that rank, rather than telling myself that I have to get a rank under that number. So that is how we process over outcome approach we have to employ. Then tool number 3 is controlled exposure to stress. So here, in the field of psychology, we often use exposure therapy. That is, we often expose the patient to certain triggers which makes them anxious. However, when we do it for our own selves, then it works in a different way. We need to train our brain to handle pressure by repeated low stakes exposure. For example, sometimes we avoid giving GTs just because we feel we are not prepared this time. We don't have to do that. If we have fixed a time for the grand test, be it every weekend, then we sit for the grand test, even if we feel that we are underprepared. That should not stop us from giving the exam, because otherwise we will start to develop a fear of the exam itself. Similarly, we have to practice solving MCQs under timed settings. We have to stimulate exam environments. For example, whenever we give the test, it should be ideally on a desktop, on a laptop. It should not be on the phone, because in the real-time exam, we don't have the phone, we have the laptop. And as we practice, this controlled anxiogenic environment, we do give the exam the way the exam has to be given on the final go. Then eventually our exam-related anxiety would start to reduce. So this is a form of an exposure therapy, especially for those students, who start fearing giving the exam itself. Then comes certain pre-performance rituals, which we can often use. So a lot of students, they would develop anxiety, which will be more physical in nature, not psychological, but rather physical. So I have to give an exam, I will start becoming breathless, or I will start having palpitations, I will start having, increased sweating. So what we can do is that whenever we sit for the mock tests also, we develop a 5-minute ritual just to stabilize our nervous system. We go for very slow breathing, we go for some body relaxation, and we constantly reassure ourselves that I am capable, I can handle this very well. So all these 4 tools, not that these tools have to be employed independently, but actually a amalgamation of all these tools is very useful. If you're fearing the grand tests, you use the controlled exposure or the pre-performance routine. Sometimes, you feel that I am putting too much burden on myself for the rank, then you apply the process over outcome reframing. So these tools can be used together in conjunction rather than independently. We have 3 more. We talk about cognitive diffusion. When we feel that anxious thoughts come repeatedly, what if I fail? What if I don't pass? What if I don't stand on the expectations which have been set? We would not fight them. That is now not how we can start forgetting those anxious thoughts. For example, if I want that you should not think about an elephant, you would definitely think about an elephant. However, when I tell myself think about a lion, only then the elephant will go out of the picture. So fighting the thoughts will only make them more stronger, right? So we have to accept that, okay, there are certain consequences or certain outcomes which are possible out of what I'm trying to do. But this particular consequence or this particular thought is my worry. It is not the fact. It is not the reality. It is a worry, but I will accept that this worry is there. So that way we reassure ourselves that just because we are thinking it again and again and again, it is not actually happening to us. So this cognitive diffusion is actually a very strong tool which we use as psychotherapists in acceptance and commitment therapy. That's why we've written from ACT therapy just below the tool. Next is reducing comparison triggers. Often we, find ourselves comparing. So what do we compare? We compare our ranks, we compare the platforms that we are using, we compare the teachers, X and Y platform is being used by my friend. I am using A and B platform, but X and Y platform is, better. My platform is not better. Then we scamper around, and that creates a lot of tussle within the brain. So we have to first set what we are doing. Once we are set, then we have to break the outside noise. Too much of outside noise will definitely impact our performance. So we have to reduce the comparison of our own capabilities, and we also have to reduce the comparison of how we are studying. Some constructive feedback is always good to us, but too much comparison leads to definitive problems. And finally, we have to tell ourselves that one bad day is not a bad journey. So we always judge ourselves from certain trends. Trend would mean how am I performing in the last 3 to 4, 4 to 6 weeks. Just because one of my mock tests has not gone well does not mean that I have started to perform bad or I'm a bad student. So we always have to follow the trends. How am I improving in my weaker subjects? How am I working towards subjects which are stronger? It is not just that one performance means that it's all done. So these tools which we talked about, the last 7 tools, they were built on the premise predominantly of how we can rewire our thinking process. Now we will talk about certain tools which we can use to manage our anxiety. Again, as we talked about distress. So what anxiety is basically a byproduct of distress. So anxiety would mean a constant fear of unknown. There is something we are worried about, and it is constantly causing us to either have palpitations, sweating, dehydration, hyperventilation, dryness of mouth, that is in the physical spectrum, or it is continuously making us overthink. There is a chain of thoughts, a never ending chain of thoughts, and there may be panic attacks repetitively happening across the day, happening across the week, wherein there is an impending feeling of doom. We might think something will happen to me, and that is actually all a spectrum of how anxiety works. So some good tools which we can use at that point of time by our own self is box breathing and progressive muscular relaxation. So all these tools are actually a very detailed topic in itself. So that will take a lot of time, but we will just touch the basics so that you know what you have to do. So whenever you have intense anxiety, you can employ the box breathing technique, where you will inhale for 3 seconds. First inhalation for 3 seconds. It should be a deep inhalation. You should feel your diaphragm is going down. After a deep inhalation of 3 seconds, you have to hold your breath for another 3 seconds. So it should not be immediate release after 3 seconds. It has to be followed by a hold. So you don't exhale it right away. And after holding it for 3 seconds, then you exhale it for 3 seconds. So that becomes a total of 9 seconds. It becomes 3, 3, and 3. 3 seconds of inhalation, 3 seconds of holding your breath, and then 3 seconds of very slow exhalation. It will be even better if you can actually extend those 3 seconds to 5 seconds. So you can do a 5-5-5 rule. That also works very well. But the basic premise of this concept is that holding the breath is extremely important. This will help to stimulate the parasympathetic system of your body. It helps to reduce the anxiety levels, and this can be employed anytime that you're feeling anxious. Similarly, another technique is progressive muscular relaxation. Again, a very detailed topic by itself. In this technique, I will just cover the very basic of this technique. What you basically do is that you put yourself in a relaxed position. That is, you can lie down on the bed or you can sit on a chair, and you would contract one of your extremity. First of all, for example, if we are talking about the upper limb, if we are talking about the palm, so you will make a fist and you will make a tight fist, and you will try to press your fist harder for say 5 seconds. And after putting pressure within your fist for 5 seconds, you will slowly start to release it. So then at the time of releasing it, you will feel extreme calm, because we are basically resetting our nervous system when we do it. First, there is a contraction, then there is a relaxation of the muscles. Similarly, after the palm, we do it on the wrist, then we do it on the elbow, then we do it on the shoulder. We will just cause a flexion of these joints for 5 seconds, and then after the flexion, very slow release. In detail, you can read about the Jacobson's progressive muscular relaxation on Google itself, and you can find some good explanatory videos on YouTube as well. So both of these are evidence-based techniques which are extremely useful to manage anxiety. This is for everyone. You can teach your friends, your family members also. Then comes certain mindfulness based techniques. So for example, you're in a haywire of a situation where a lot of overthinking and anxiety is going on, and you need to actually break the loop. You need something that you can help yourself escape the rut. So this is a mindfulness based technique which is known as 5-4-3-2-1 rule. In this technique, what we do is that you tell yourself to name 5 things that you can see around you. That can be anything. For example, right now, when I'm sitting across the laptop, it can be the table, the laptop, the bottle, my phone, all things around me. So I have to tell myself, okay, 5 things which I can name, which I can see around myself. Then 4 things which I can physically touch, right, around me. I need to touch it by my hand and tell it to myself, what am I touching? So am I touching the table? I'm touching the laptop. I'm touching my phone. So that is how I do it. Then 3 means 3 things that you can hear. So in any room which you are sitting, there must be a lot of sounds around you. It may be the sound of somebody talking right across. It may be the sound of your fan. It may be the sound of your phone. It may be the sound of some cars on the road. So you have to tell yourself 3 things which you can hear. Then 2 things which you can smell. And finally, 1 thing which you can taste. If there is no such thing available in front of you, then you take a deep breath. So this is known as the 5-4-3-2-1 mindfulness based technique, or the 5-4-3-2-1 grounding technique. This is a very good technique to escape the rut of overthinking and anxiety. You immediately focus on these activities. And when you do it, it will employ about 1.5 minutes of your time, and it will stop your focus from the anxiogenic thought which was troubling you. Then talking about building mental resilience, we have to understand that exam preparation is like running the relay race. It is not a sprint. So preparation is a relay race. Each week is a new lap. Your only goal is to hand over the baton stronger than before. You can plan for the long term, but actually what is in front of you is the next day, and for some extension, maybe the week. That is it. But beyond that, you will have to rethink, replan, and reset yourself. So you stick to your plan, you take breaks in between so that you don't get burnouts and your memory also remains boosted. And finally, you focus on trends. As we discussed before, there may be bad days, there may be some grand tests, some performances you would not like, but you don't have to focus on those bad days. You have to focus on the trends. And gradually, there will be an incremental growth week on week, month on month, and eventually you will win those laps. So always remember that it is running the relay race. Don't get discouraged by the small hiccups in the journey. Then we talk about building a healthy routine. So when we talk about building a healthy routine, I'm sure that you must have followed various YouTube strategies, or your mentors or your seniors, wherein everyone tells you how to study. But I am here to actually tell you what are the key areas which you have to take care of beyond your studies, because I'm sure you will be able to find plenty of resources talking about the studies. But as much the study is important, physical activity, sleep, proper and balanced and mindful meal, and also being socially connected, all of these are very important, and there is a very strong evidence to each one of that. How? We'll talk about that. So exercise, yoga, walking, stretching, dancing, singing, drawing, whatever you like, just ensure that you have a physical activity in your routine for at least 30 minutes a day. Not just it will help you to improve your physical body in itself, so that you don't develop a sedentary lifestyle while you sit for long hours and study, but it will also help boost the endorphins. It will also help boost your neurotransmitters while you are studying, so that it does not cause you to get stuck in a loop where you're not able to get about doing things. Physical activities will help you to re-energize. Physical activities will help you to refocus. So that 30 minutes of physical activity is extremely important, and there are n number of evidence-backed studies which prove the same, that as much as you study, you can study for 18 hours a day, 16 hours a day, but if you are lacking physical activity, eventually it will make you to hit a plateau. So be sure to include some amount of physical activity, as simple as it can be. Then it is very important to stick to a regular sleep schedule. Same bedtime and wake time, that should be an ideal thing to do. But at least you would try that if you could do that for at least 4 days in a week. Then unplugging from technology before you sleep, creating a relaxing bedtime routine, for example, a warm shower, some reading, some mild meditation for 5 to 10 minutes, limiting the screen time, especially because the blue light, the blue light is associated with disruption of the circadian rhythm. So 30 minutes before bedtime, you have to stop the screen time. You have to keep your bedroom cool, dark, not cool, especially in winters, but definitely it should not be too hot in summers. But the point is that it should be an ambient temperature. Similarly, when I talk about limiting the screen time, often, students actually set time for solving MCQs at night before the bedtime. This is a very common activity students would do, that they would solve the MCQs just before going to sleep. They will revise something on their tabs or on their laptops or on their phones. This is a good habit to actually, keep some study material just before you go to sleep. But the problem is that exposure to blue light will again hamper your sleep time. So that balance has to be maintained, because the sleep is directly related with consolidation of memory, and it is directly related with your performance during the daytime. So if your sleep is disrupted, whatever you might do before going to sleep, you might solve 200 MCQs correctly. Eventually, it will cause you a problem after a few weeks of repetitive routine. So correct way of sleeping, correct method of actually, not misusing the time before you sleep, and ensuring that it is a more sustained and regular pattern which you follow for sleep is extremely important. Then we talk about balanced diet, which is nourishing not just the body but also the mind. Eating regular and balanced meals, and there should be nutrient dense foods, but avoiding very caloric dense foods, especially at night. Then staying hydrated by drinking plenty of water, limiting caffeine and sugar intake, especially in the afternoon or in the evening. And then finally, mindful eating, which I have talked about in the first slide also of the introduction of this particular chapter, that we have to focus on the activity of chewing. We have to focus on the activity of swallowing and cherishing the taste. Often when we are studying, we just hog food. पढ़ाई कर रहा हूँ, I am, looking across the chapter, something is right in front of me, and I'm just hogging the food, because at that point of time, I'm telling myself I have to focus on studying the thing which I'm studying. I have to focus on remembering. Kuch bhi aa jaye, I'll just eat it. The point is that food will cause more harm than good, because at that point of time, I will eat more, I will eat mindlessly, I will not even know how much I have eaten, I will not even know if I have properly chewed it or not. So it might cause, acidity to me. It might cause bloating to me. So, okay, you spend 15 minutes for your time of your day every day for the meal. For example, 15 minutes in the afternoon, 15 minutes at night, or maybe 20 minutes. That time has to be focused on eating. Very often we, use that time for doing the MCQs or studying as well, but eventually again that will cause more harm than good in the long run. So give yourself that time, give yourself that care. Those 15-20 minutes for every meal will not cause, a significant problem in your study schedule. You can cope up with that kind of time in your life. Those 15-20 minutes are much more important for your mental health. Then we come to the next segment, which is handling setbacks. So this is very important, because uh, every time we come across a situation where we don't feel that we have performed optimally, it is a setback for us, which may be poor grand test scores, dips in the daily or weekly performance, plateauing scores, burnout, exhaustion, emotional setbacks in our personal life, and then maybe, multiple attempts to achieve success in the exam. So, what are the cognitive impacts of setbacks? Whenever something happens to us, it is known as a trigger event, which you can see in this diagram. Then that leads to negative thoughts. You start thinking about, I'm not able to perform. I'm not a good student. I'm not a good student. that will lead to emotions. We will start feeling sad. Eventually, that behavior will be reinforced because we will not be able to achieve the marks. Am I audible?
Yeah, now better. In between, there was a
Am
cut
I
again.
audible? Is there any issue with the audio?
Yeah, there was an issue.
All right, all right. From which part should I read again? Okay, sure.
Yeah.
So I was talking about how the negative spiral process works. So whenever there is a negative event in our life, for example, there's a setback, there will be negative thoughts, which will cause self-criticism. I'm not good enough. I'm not a good student. That will cause negative emotions. We will start feeling sad. We will start feeling frustrated. That will lead to a behavior. For example, we start studying less. We do not adhere to our schedule. Then that will lead to reinforcement, means that our scores will further drop, and eventually this spiral will continue and it will cause us more harm. So we have to break this spiral. We have to process the setbacks in an adaptive fashion so that we don't fall in the full spiral and we are not stuck. So how do we restart? Setbacks are not the focus of the problem. Our maladaptive coping is. So there are some evidence-based strategies. One is cognitive restructuring, one is behavioral activation, and one is growth mindset training. We just cover brief of these strategies. CBT, thought restructuring. Now, as most of you might know, cognitive behavioral therapy is a full-fledged psychotherapeutic intervention which we employ in various mental illnesses. However, we can utilize CBT for our own good as students. I will try to simplify it. There will be doubts. We can address those doubts later. But I will try to simplify how we can use it ourselves as students. So as I talked before, there will be negative thoughts, which will lead to negative emotions, which will lead to negative actions. That is a negative thought cycle. So what are the negative thoughts? I'm not good enough. Others are moving ahead. Maybe I'm not meant for this. So these thoughts happen even before you consciously evaluate the situation. This leads to cognitive distortions. What are cognitive distortions? Cognitive distortions, we create, make a rule which is not existing in reality, but for us it becomes the reality. For example, we catastrophize. A bad grand test means that I'll definitely fail the real exam. Or we overgeneralize that every time I do poorly, this will always happen. We start mind reading. Everyone thinks I'm dumb. Or there is something known as all or none thinking or dichotomous thinking. We tell ourselves, if this is not a certain score, I'm worthless. Then negative filtering. I only remember the silly mistakes, not the correct ones. So these are examples of how we start to develop these cognitive distortions, which are maladaptive ways, sorry, of dealing with situations. This leads to emotional consequences, anxiety, guilt, shame, hopelessness, pressure, and this leads to maladaptive behaviors. Avoiding grand tests, procrastination, studying but not retaining, overstudying, comparing every move to peers, constantly checking ranks. So a lot of you would be now able to relate that it is not as simple. Suddenly when we don't feel like studying or suddenly when we have procrastination, it's not that simple. Uske piche there's a very long loop. There's a lot of things happening behind that, which are negative thoughts, negative emotions leading to negative behaviors. So whenever we understand those thoughts at the very start, we will be able to restructure how we think and we will start feeling better because we will avoid the negative consequences in the form of negative emotions and we will avoid the negative behaviors. How? We have a simple three-step tool. You have to catch the thought. You have to be intelligent to catch it whenever it comes. So I just gave a test and I did not get a desired score. And I had a thought that I have a low GT ranks and I tell myself that I'm not a PG material. So we have to challenge the thought that what evidence supports it and what contradicts it. In actuality, does a low GT rank means I'm not PG material, or this is just about a test which did not go well? So I have to challenge myself immediately whenever I have that thought. And when I find that thought not to be correct, then I will have to reframe it. Have to tell myself that it's okay. It's just a diagnostic test. It's just a test to actually see how am I doing, and I will work upon it. And this is not the final verdict. So that restructuring you have to do but at your own level, and eventually whenever you're able to catch the thought, you will realize that slowly it is causing an improvement in your day-to-day functioning, because you're not waiting for it to become catastrophic. Similarly, there is something known as behavioral activation. In behavioral activation, you don't focus on the entire picture. You focus on small parts of the picture. So for example, if you feel that you become avoidant towards the grand test or avoidant towards the test and discussions, then don't get stuck in the loop of paralysis. You restart with small doable tasks, solve small custom modules, solve small grand test sections. Don't go for the entire exam at once. And or you can also use structured study blocks like Pomodoro technique. We all know how the Pomodoro technique works, that we study for few minutes and then we take a break for a few minutes. So these techniques are known as behavioral activation, because we don't restructure our thoughts, but we change our behavior. In the cognitive restructuring, we're trying to change how we think. But in behavioral activation, we are just fixing a possible, plausible, doable routine so that we don't avoid the inevitability of the anxiety of something which we are fearing. Then comes the final part, which is the growth mindset training. So in the growth mindset training, it's a form of the cognitive restructuring only, but it works slightly differently, because here we start to focus on the metrics, that how many MCQs I am doing, how many times I have revised. I'm not focusing on the performance. I'm focusing on the metrics which I am doing. So for example, somebody with a fixed mindset, they will tell themselves that I'm not good enough and everyone is improving. But when you have a growth mindset, you will tell yourself, it's all right. The grand test is showing me what to fix. This is not who I am. And you will tell yourself that every plateau precedes a jump. It will get better. So eventually we are creating more motivation. We are creating more curiosity. We are not going into the emotional and consequential part of it. So it is not as complex as thought restructuring. But here we are only talking positive talks to ourselves. We are only reframing the things which make us fearful at that point of time. Then comes seeking professional help. This is very important, because till now we have talked about how you can help to improve your own self. But now we will talk about the part where the role of a professional comes in. Because at the end of the day, if the anxiety, if the mental burden, if it is not being able, if you are not being able to manage it by your own, then you definitely need professional help. Now, what are the red flags where you identify that you are indeed in need of professional help? First of all, if there is a persistent change in mood, sleep, appetite, or self-care. But what is a persistent change? Persistent change is something which stays for most days of the week, or which stays for most weeks of the month, or which stays for most hours of the day. So if it is staying for almost the entire day, almost the entire month, or almost the entire week, then it means that it has become a persistent pattern. So persistent change in mood would mean that earlier you were normal, you were happy also in between, sad also, but now you are staying irritable most day of the week or most hours of the day. Similarly, you are staying very sad, or your mood has become very labile. Sometimes you are very happy, sometimes you are very sad. So again, that is also a cause of significant concern. Then there is a persistent change in the sleep. You're not able to catch sleep for days, or hours of your sleep have significantly contracted, or you're waking up early than the time you would want. So again, there is a persistent change in the sleep. Then a persistent change in the appetite. You're eating too less, or you're eating too much more than what you would usually eat. Then would come a change in your self-care, wherein earlier you would take baths almost every day, and now you're avoiding taking baths, you're avoiding taking care of yourself, you're avoiding taking care of things you're responsible for, you're avoiding to change your clothes. So everything and anything related to your own self-care, you're changed for a persistent period of time. That would also be a red flag sign. Then impaired functioning. What would impaired functioning be? That you are avoiding going out, meeting people, or even avoiding, talking to your friends, avoiding talking to your family members. That would mean that there is an impaired functioning. Then impaired educational functioning is that पढ़ाई करने का मन ही नहीं कर रहा, you're totally avoiding your study schedule, you're not able to study, you're not able to focus occupationally. You're an intern, you're working somewhere as a doctor, you're doing a job, you're not able to work, you're not able to go to work. Even if you go to the work, you're not able to focus. uh, People are telling you that you're not giving in the hours enough. So you're getting that subjective response from other people also, that they're also noticing that change in you, and you are also noticing that change in yourself. That would tantamount to impaired functioning. Then definitely suicidal thoughts which are persistent in nature. Suicidal thoughts would mean wherein you would feel that I want to take my life. That is a suicidal thought. It can also be a passive thought wherein you would feel life is not worth living. What is the point of living? And these are persistent. A sudden thought which came and went about, that may be just more of an impulsive thought. But if it is constantly sticking to you, that you are again and again thinking about what's the point of life, or you're having a thought that life is not worth living, or you're planning the ways how can you harm yourself, then these are significant causes of concern which needs professional intervention. Then comes unremitting, persistent, or recurrent anxiety. Anxiety, I've already talked about how it would, uh, you know, uh, how you would feel anxiety physically and psychologically. Then persistent sleep issues, I've already talked about, but also that persistent sleep issues would mean that your total sleep, which is the night sleep as well as the day sleep, that is less or that is too much. So, for example, if you're sleeping 3 hours at night, and you're sleeping 4 hours in the afternoon, then your total sleep is 7 hours. So again, the total hours of sleep are perfectly fine. It is the sleep cycle which is a cause of concern for you. But if you are sleeping too less or too more, which is throughout the 24-hour cycle, then it means that it is a significant cause of concern. And finally, there is a violent behavior. You're becoming too aggressive. You're becoming too angry. That is also a red flag. So all of these signs and symptoms would definitely mean that you need to visit a psychiatrist. You need to take a consultation. You need professional help for yourself, because this has gone beyond the realm where you can control it. You can employ means to control it your own self. So we'll just summarize it. So we've made a mnemonic for that. The entire topic which we discussed today, known as the balance approach, which will be breathing and taking breaks. For B for breathe and taking breaks. A for keeping your body active, employing physical activities 20 to 30 minutes a day. L for limiting digital distractions, so that you don't waste a lot of time. Then A for adequate sleep, as we discussed. N for nutrition and hydration. C for connectivity with people. And E for emotional checking in and seeking help whenever needed. So this balance is very important to maintain a healthy mental health, to have mental wellness. And as we discussed, wherever you will have problems related to dealing with setbacks, dealing with anxiety, we have discussed a large number of techniques in the form of CBT restructuring. We have talked about behavioral activation. We have talked about growth mindset training. We've talked about relaxation techniques. We have talked about 5-5-5 or 3-3-3 breathing rule, progressive muscular relaxation. So all of that goes hand in hand with a balanced lifestyle. So it is extremely important, because often we ignore ourselves, but we have to tell ourselves that जब तक मैं ठीक हूं तब तक भी मैं इस एग्जाम को निकाल पाऊंगा. So you are the priority. The exam is the second priority. You are the first priority. You have to be healthy, both physically and mentally, to give in your best. And if you give in your best, the exam will get cracked eventually. So that is a byproduct. So thank you so much. I hope today's session was helpful to one and all. And now we will open the session for questions.
Yeah, first of all, it was very important for me also to remind myself, because there's a lot of mistake I myself is doing, because there's a lot of work, and then I ended up like avoiding or saying no to my own priorities. Ki, wo to ho jayega, work is more important. So yeah, that was a lot of signals for me to start working on that direction. But all of you can ask your question either in the chat box, या फिर unmute. You can unmute and ask. Yes, Sapna, please.
Thank you, sir, for such a wonderful session. It was really, really informative. And sir, I would like to ask you that me being a repeater, sir, I am procrastinating my studies. Like I am doing my counseling also. So might be there's a false hope, might be there's a true hope. I don't know. But I'm just trying to procrastinate things, sir. Can you just give me some reasonable way out of it? Because sir, studying the same thing again and again is really difficult, I understand, but then how do I push myself? Because they say they don't change the sources. If I have some new things to study, maybe that will add some interest. But again, if I change the sources again, that will create a confusion. So, sir, that's a big loop. So, sir, how to go about it? Will you please be kind enough to guide me? Thank you.
That's a very good question, Sapna. And so I've talked about procrastination. I talked about procrastination as a maladaptive behavior consequence. So we actually start to work in the same direction back, the retrospective method. You need to find what exactly is causing you to procrastinate. What is the fear behind that procrastination? It might be different for you. It might be different for me. It might be different for someone else. So for someone, it might be key. I will not be able to perform. What's the point? So we'll do it later. For someone, it might be I'm too bored with reading the same thing again and again. So the first point is to go into the retrospective method of identifying the thought behind the procrastination itself. Once you have the thought clear, then you will be able to restructure the thought for your own self. That is a more cognitive way of dealing with it. Now, you wanted me to answer some techniques to you, some behavioral techniques to you. So I think this is something which I also went through. I went through the same problem because when I gave NEET PG, what happened was that the exam got delayed. So I remember it was in April and then it got delayed to I think May, and it was March and it got to April. Sorry, so it was extremely problematic for me because I was totally I had fixated that I will give the exam on this day and I'll be free and I don't want to study more. And when it happened, I was like, how will I study? So I think there are certain ways to go about it. One is that you, rather than, you reading passively and then solving MCQs, you do it the reverse way around. So retrospective method, like the retrospective thought, retrospective method of studying. So you solve the MCQs, because what happens is when I solve the MCQs, there might be some correct ones, but then I might commit mistakes. So as soon as I commit mistakes, I will become little worried that, okay, maybe I don't remember things properly. Because if I just open the notes and read it again and again and again, it will bore me out. It will cause me to procrastinate to open the notes. But when I solve MCQs first and I make the mistakes, it will stimulate me. The use stress, which we talked about, that, oh my God, I need to cover this topic. So I need to go back and read my notes. So you can start focusing more on the MCQ part, on the objective part. So that creates that significant use stress for you to go back. And another method would be to change your study methodology to more active recall method, like using flashcards, things which stimulate your memory, things which stimulate you to go back and read from the texts. So these will be very useful tools which we can use. But as I mentioned before, at the core of it will be understanding why you are getting procrastinated, what is the exact thought behind it.
Okay, sir. Need to think for yourself that what is it that makes me procrastinating. Sir, if it is boredom, then maybe these techniques will help me for sure. Thank
Correct.
you, sir.
And also, again, when too much dullness in life and no play, that also causes a lot of procrastination. I often feel that when we include some physical activity, something which we like to do half an hour a day, despite how much we are studying, that gets a positive reinforcement. We want to study because we tell
Some new
ourselves, okay, now I've
schedule.
had some, now I want to study. So that you can also inculcate.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much.
And many have this fear of failure, then how to deal with that? Because this thoughts keeps coming, ki, what if I won't be able to do it? What if exam day something bad will happen? Everything will go in vain. Even in life also, like we are putting different efforts, different thing, and then the bad thoughts come that what if it didn't work out? So what to do in that case?
So I had covered this right in the
Hmm.
start in the
Yeah, in the
previous. So
first.
I'll reiterate it again. So it's very easy. We often catastrophize, one day or one outcome as everything. And because of that, what happens is that there is a negative association with everything related to that one day. That, how will I solve the MCQ properly? How will I attempt it on the computer? What will I do if I get fever before one day before? And all those negative thoughts start to develop in that loop. So again, as I mentioned there, in the various tools, we have to employ those techniques. Example, if it is a fear of the test itself, then we have to stimulate the test conditions. We fix the time for the mock test. We give it at that very time. We give it on the computer. We ensure that we are not distracted while we are giving it. We're not on the phone. Nobody's calling us, so that we experience that anxiety while we are giving the mock tests. And that is exposure therapy. When we'll do it again and again and again, if I've given 50 mock tests and I've given them on Sundays, typically when the exam occurs, I've given it in the mornings or in the afternoons, typically the time of the exam, and I've given it in solace, eventually I will start to develop a habit of the exam, right? And then when I have a habit of the exam itself, the fear related with the exam, it will start to progressively go down. And there are other techniques also which I've mentioned about cognitive restructuring, and as I think we can share the presentation as well later. I'll just share it and then we can have it for everyone. So those techniques are extremely useful in those situations.
There is one thing, that how to balance and deal with relationship issues, the emotional balance, triggering factor, and overthinking, anxiety about lack of clarity of future in a both career and relationship.
Very good question and very practical question. This is something actually I did not cover in the presentation. I wanted to cover it. It was getting too long and I thought my topic is regarding the exam part, so I did not cover it. But this is actually a very practical question. It happens to almost most of us. So see, I think in this situation, I have gone about a lot of things which different people have to say. There are certain schools of thoughts which will say, don't get involved in all of this, which is not possible. So I will have a more balanced approach to this answer. So what I feel is that just like education, just like exams, just like professional qualification, relationships and romantic relationships per se, and future settlement in terms of marriage, and all of those things are things which go hand in hand when we talk about life in general. Because you want to grow professionally, you want to become a doctor, you want to become a postgraduate, but you also want a balanced life at home, you want a balanced partner, you want to have a stable marriage. So all of those things go hand in hand. Now the point is that you have to keep everything in isolation. It's difficult said than done. Obviously, it's difficult to do it rather than saying it. But the point is that it has to be done in isolation. So if I have time for my relationship, which is fixed, I have to ensure that it is not interfering with my study time. It is not interfering with my career time. Both the things have to go in absolute solace, in absolute independence. They cannot, cross each other. So what this means is that if I rely too much, that if I talk to my husband, or if I talk to my boyfriend, or if I talk to my friend, and he will, tell me that it's okay, only then I'll go and study. Or likewise, I can't tell myself repetitively that I have to study because I have to make this relationship work. Either way, that has to be very independent of all of that. And that takes time to develop. But the question, what you asked, is actually a very wide question. Everything cannot be answered in one go. But the basic crux of the answer is that that has to be very independent. Education is very important because you have to settle, you have to grow, you have to develop skills, because you have to save people, heal people, and you have to be the breadwinner. You have to earn money. You have to practice it out there. So it has to be something which you do in absolute solace, and the relationship is equally important. So if there is a intermingling of both the things, that will lead to problems. And in individual points, we have to talk about everything independently. That will become a very long discussion, but this is the basic crux of it, that it will be there, it should be there, but it should be handled independently.
There is a message also from Ruthvi, if you could just read, because that would be better.
Yeah. So Ruthvi says that a low GT score means I am not competitive enough to handle human lives. Is it the lack of knowledge? a week before last NEET attempt, I couldn't study and just cried. Now, if I get triggered, I go back to that place and fear intensifies. How to manage it? Okay, Rutvi. So, Rutvi, first of all, a low GT score means I'm not competent enough to handle human lives. We talked about cognitive distortions. We talked about cognitive distortions in the presentation, that cognitive distortions are those rigid rules, those rigid assumptions, which make us think about an eventual consequence just from a single thought. So we talked about catastrophizing, the first cognitive distortion. What is a catastrophe? It is a major severe disaster. So here what you have done is that you have related a low grand test score directly with your incompetence or your negative thought of incompetence of handling the human life. So this is a cognitive distortion. So first of all, this means that this is not a rational thought. So you be rest assured that this is not a rational thought. You don't need to worry. This is not the reality which will actually happen. This is a byproduct of your negative thinking, which happens, which is perfectly fine. But this is not the rational thought. So a low GT score only means that you are either not prepared enough, or you are not able to manage your anxiety regarding the exam well, or you were not able to attempt it to your full potential. That is only what is possible out of a low GT score, nothing more and nothing less. Handling human lives is purely your skill competence, how well you're able to manage the situation. It has nothing to, you leave the GT, it is not even related to how much you score in the NEET, let me tell you. Honestly, it is not even related to that. You can be an excellent clinician and you might not have had great scores in the exams, right? So it is not related to that. Even leave the NEET exam, even in the subjective exams, as a medical aspirant, as a medical student in the undergraduation, MBBS and an MD, even you might be the last person in your class, but you might be the best with the clinical skills. So that is absolutely not interrelated. You be rest assured. Second is that what you're talking about is basically another negative association which has been created between the NEET attempt and again when you are giving the exam. So that needs to be broken down. How it needs to be broken down, we'll need to go into the details. Again, that is not it's not possible to answer that question without those details here. It's a very specific question. But broadly, if it is related to anxiety, you can employ the techniques which we discussed. However, if you feel that despite everything, it is still troubling you and it is not allowing you to study on a day-to-day basis and it has been weeks altogether, then it is definitely something which you need professional help for. So that you can check on it, whether if that is that kind of intensity of the fear is there, then you definitely need to take a professional help once. They'll be able to give you a more specific plan as to what problem you are experiencing and what exact solution should be there for your problem.
Fair. We'll take one more last question from Tarun. You have raised your hand, right? Unmute and ask, and then we'll wrap it up.
Hello, sir. Sir,
Hi,
actually,
Dewan.
I want ask you about a point you mentioned about social connection. Till internship, we have the habit of going, like at the end of the day, going to our friends and talking and hanging out. But just after internship, while preparing, we lose people, like we lose touch, and it's very obvious. So we hit that loneliness. So does it matter, and if it's bothering, how to deal with it while preparing?
So I mentioned about social connections is because human is a social animal. And what happens is that isolation is not helpful for anyone. Isolation might be helpful for 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, week, 2, 3 weeks at max. But beyond that isolation, it becomes very dangerous. So if you are post NEET and you are no longer in the medical college setting, how you can navigate it depends on where you are. So for example, if you are with your parents, again, the social connectivity can be via parents, via siblings. If you are at home, it can be via neighbors, via friends who are present locally. If you are at a situation where the physical connection cannot be possible face to face, you have the phone call. You have friends, you can call them up, you can discuss the problems with them, you can talk to them. And not just academic things, but it's equally important to be in touch of non-academic things also. This is something which we often miss while talking about exams. That in life in general, especially when we are in those phases where we are away from schools, colleges, families, and we are in a space only to study, it's very important to call up and to talk about non-academic things also. Because again, as I mentioned, you are the first priority. Your mental health is the first priority, and human beings, they seek compassion, they seek conversation, and conversation cannot always be about the exam. And if it starts to become about the exam always, then it will become a cause of concern eventually. Mental health will start to recede. So you can do it. Family members are there, local friends are there, neighbors are there, telephone conversations you can have, video calls you can do. So you can employ all these alternatives. But the point is that you should give in some time for all of that. Not that I'm saying that you spend 6 hours a day doing it, but some minutes, 10, 15 minutes, 20 minutes of your day should be these leisure conversations also. Can be with a friend, can be with parents, but these are very important.
Thank you, sir.
Fair. So I think we're already ahead of time. We will wrap it up. To all of you, I'll share the PPT anywhere in all the groups and over the email too. So you will re-go through it. And Geeteshwar is also available for one-on-one mentorship. So anytime anybody have to talk personal, which we don't want to cover in a session because it's going to be posted on YouTube too, right? So that's the reason we are avoiding that part. So if any one of you want to have a word, Geeteshwar is all available there to have a one-on-one session with you. Okay. Thank you so much, Geeteshwar, for taking this wonderful session. I think I needed it more than anybody because I really in that state that I am leaving my own self in just in the thing of managing too much thing. I've started prioritizing everybody except my own self. So I'll go back and fix it.
Thank you, and you're most welcome. Thank you for having me for this wonderful session.
Thank you, and chalo, bye all of you, and have a very good night. Sleep.